But now we talk expectations. For a guy that is looking like he will become one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid annually, quarterback in the NFL, what does that do for the expectations, the word of the day so far? Gabe, I start with you.
Yeah, so that's part of now what Jordan has to manage, because he has to manage not even, everything that he did and trying to build it over. And one of my favorite Mike McCarthyisms is stacking successes, right? Like that's one of the things that he talked about, and how they're going to handle success. And how you do that in the NFL does determine how good of a player you are going to be looked at. So first and foremost, if you get a contract that is going to be starting, with the 6, maybe it ends up being the Trevor Lawrence deal at 55, like the expectations go up. And when you have a bad game against a bad team like the Giants in the middle of a playoff push like he did a year ago, like the criticism is going to become a little bit louder. And maybe not right away, because this team is going to be together for the next couple of seasons in terms of the young wide receiver core that they have, the tight ends. But when you're paying your quarterback that much, obviously you have to cut corners at other positions. You're not going to be able to hold on to all these pass catchers. Who knows what happens at the running back position? And because you're paying your quarterback. And you now have to make all those players better. You have to make, whoever ends up being the next wide receiving group, you got to make those guys better. So I don't know if the expectations and criticism necessarily come this year, because that core is still going to be together. But the second that they start losing some of these guys to free agency because they can't or won't pay them, that's when, all right, now the criticism, now the expectations, now the microscope is going to go up on Jordan Love.
Well, the can't versus won't is a whole nother discussion that I think we should have at some point during the show, because I think Goody is leaving plenty of breadcrumbs, especially with that. You only average 1.6 players from each draft class that get a second contract, which is not how things used to be in Green Bay. Guys like John Runyon would have gotten a second deal, and he does not get one this past offseason. I think it's really interesting to use the handling success line from Mike McCarthy and apply it to Jordan Love like you did, because that is a challenge. And I remember sitting in the press conference when Mike McCarthy said that, and I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, I remember him as the quarterback's coach in 1999 under Ray Rhodes, but I wouldn't have expected him to deliver such a boastful, if we're being honest, remark. And it was. Like, our biggest problem is going to be handling success. Well, if that's Jordan Love's biggest problem this year, then the Packers should feel really, really good. It shouldn't, if it's not the way defenses are facing him and coming up with different ways to defend him, if it's not injuries to his guys in the wide receiver group, if his biggest challenge is handling success and handling a big contract, then the Packers will be over the moon happy. I do wonder how any player, whether he's Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre or Sean Clifford or Michael Pratt, whoever plays the position, handles expectations, pressure, and a big contract. Now, that's not a problem for Sean Clifford or for Michael Pratt, but the other two guys had it and handled it fine. Jordan Love does not strike me as too big for his britches, get a big head guy. Very even-keeled, very calm and unemotional. Some might say boring in his press conferences, but that is his M.O. Is he the kind of guy that is suddenly going to think, I've arrived, I don't have to work as hard? No, I don't think that. But I do think he's the kind of guy, like Randall Cobb in 2015, that if the contract is going to be a challenge for him, it'll be because he's putting extra pressure on himself to deliver on it for a team that has paid him handsomely. And I remember those conversations with Randall Cobb during the 15 season. He was so conscientious, and I think that's who Jordan Love is extremely conscientious. The idea of, I got to play great. These guys paid me. They are counting on me. If there's any way that the contract would affect him, that would be it, in my opinion.
So I understand we're talking about millions and millions of dollars difference, right? For a guy that made, I think it was $13 million last year and is due about $13 million as well this year until the extension is signed. Do you think he was already doing that? Do you think he was already applying the pressure because he's taking over for a first ballot, 4-time MVP, Hall of Fame caliber type player in Aaron Rodgers?
I mean, it was a different type of pressure last year because it was pressure to go out and prove. And actually, not
belong,
even
right.
that you belong. Because the previous time that we saw him start a football game, he did not prove and did not look like he belonged. Right? So now it's going out there and, hey, I can do this. I can be this guy. And it's, there were a lot of things going on. Now he's more comfortable. He understands what's going on. But it's a matter of, again, you start to kind of get in your own head if that's the case, as it happened with Randall Cobb of, all right, well, this maybe you start trying to be a little too perfect, and then you start missing a little bit more, and then you start fighting it a little bit. Who knows what happens with Jordan Love? I fully expect him to be able to handle it. But again, as you become a bigger and bigger star, there's more pulls in different directions of your time. Different endorsers that want your time. Different, so you're looking at a lot of different things that you have to learn how to prioritize. Every young player has to learn how to go through that if you're going to be a star in this league. So that's just part of the learning process and part of the learning curve that Jordan Love is not done with, by the way, going into his second season as a starter.
So last year we spent our time making Strofe sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Ruining his
You were really
day.
good at
His
it, too.
Weekend was, and again, through 7 games, we looked like we knew what the hell we were talking about. The last 10, not as much.
Looked like I knew what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. But are we? I don't want to do that to him again.
Correct.
Oh, thanks.
At the same time, I do think that there is, and I'm not predicting this is going to happen. I'm not saying that this is what's likely to happen. But do we at least have to have a conversation about how it has become something of a foregone conclusion that Jordan Love is going to be as star-spangled awesome as he was for those last 10 games?
The best example of, I guess, a warning, and I expect him to be better than what Trevor Lawrence was a year ago. But you look at what Jacksonville did in year 2 of him as a starter. Again, I kind of throw out year 1 for him just because of the circumstances of Urban Meyer being in the NFL and that just being the biggest circus that we've seen in quite some time. But it took him about a half a season under Doug Peterson, and then he really thrived.
Right.
That Jacksonville team got hot. They ended up winning a playoff game before they fell in the second round. I think he was like, it wasn't as good as Jordan, but I think his interception to touchdown ratio was like 15-2. 15 touchdowns, 2 picks over the last 7 or 8 games of the regular season. Now, Jordan was a little bit higher than that in terms of the touchdown and production, but that kind of seems familiar to what it was a year ago, right? And Jacksonville had a lot of expectations, especially in a division that did not seem like it was going to be that good. Ended up being better than we thought because of what Houston did. And they ended up missing the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence didn't play as well as you thought he was going to. Still ends up getting the big contract for them. But that to me is the warning. That's the warning of, okay, you just assume they're going to be good. Work still needs to be done for this team. I fully expect them to be a good team this season. But just because they got hot at the end of last season doesn't mean that, oh, yeah, they're going 13-4 this year.
Yeah, it's a fair point, right? Progression isn't guaranteed, especially in the NFL. And while we saw great examples of progression when it comes to the young wide receiving core, who we'll dive into a little bit deeper in a bit, and when it comes to Jordan Love and the way he was, quote-unquote, cut loose about halfway through the season, you should be excited as a Packers fan. You should have high expectations. You should think this team can win double-digit games and win the NFC North and be a real powerhouse and a threat in the NFC. But it's not guaranteed. When you hear people like somebody we quoted earlier, Mike Tannenbaum, saying after Mahomes, he'd take Love, I don't know if he's quite to that level of superstardom after a really nice run. Don't get me wrong. He was the best quarterback in the NFL the second half of last season. But can that translate to 2024? Does that mean it can be duplicated? That I don't know the answer to.
And the one parallel that I would make would be Jalen Hurts.
Yeah,
who obviously was number 2 in the MVP balloting, took his team to the Super Bowl. Now he lost his offensive coordinator, who obviously went to Indianapolis.
Yes,
and is very highly regarded. I think there's a lot of people that think that he's going to have do really good work with Anthony Richardson. This is why we have a national guy on the show. No doubt. But he did struggle at times last year, and we were having the same conversations about Jalen Hurts a previous offseason ago as we're now having about Jordan Love. And I know it's not apples to apples. They're different type players, but he got a contract. He had playoff success. And so they were in the same draft class. So it'll be interesting to see how Jordan – I'm not saying you have to worry about Jordan Love. What I'm saying is growth is not linear, and there are going to be moments where he struggles.
Yeah, and with Jalen Hurts, he actually ended up having, I believe, the same number of touchdowns rushing and throwing last year that he had the year before. The turnovers were the issue with him a year ago. Mm-hmm. And that is, if I had one thing for Jordan Love to clean up, it is those because usually when the interceptions come, they're not like, oh, it was so close, it was tipped up in the air, and it could have gone either way.
No, they're bad.
They're bad. So, and they were very few and far between in the second half. Mm-hmm. But the interceptions that he threw in the divisional round, especially the one where he decided to force it when he just didn't need to against the 49ers that ended the season, like those things need to be cleaned up. Again, I fully expect him to clean it up, but there's still things that need to be done. He's not at the level where I'm not worried about him. After 2009, year 2 of Rodgers, maybe it was after 2010, probably after the Super Bowl. I went into every season and it wasn't, you're not worried about Aaron Rodgers. Mm-mm. That guy's going to do what Aaron Rodgers does. I have full confidence in him. Jordan Love's just not there yet. He still has to build to that, and that usually takes a couple of seasons.
The word I've used a lot of Mr. Irrelevant this offseason is consistency.
Yeah.
Right? Because Jordan Love wasn't consistent last year.
No.
He had a great 8-game stretch and then into the postseason. But you're right. That last throw against San Francisco, I might call it Favre-esque, but that might be insulting to Brett Favre. I mean, that was a bad throw. And
bad decision.
That's our walking away moment, or memory of the Packers 2023 season was, a really bad interception to end it.
Certainly the kind of throw we thought, and this tells you how far he'd come, certainly the kind of throw we thought he was already past.
Yep.
And that is why it was so surprising, because I don't know about you, but I was sitting there watching going, he's going to take him down, and they're going to at least get a field goal. Because Anders Carlson, for all his faults, didn't miss a whole lot of 2 kicks in a row situations. I'm not sure if he even had one instance of that for all the kicks he missed. They're either going to tie this game or they're going to go win it. And they had plenty of time, and as Homer likes to point out, that interception.
First down.
It was on first down. Didn't need to throw that. And that is part of the other question you may have is Aaron Rodgers went from being the guy during 2011 where he had so many guys wide open that he was always just my favorite receiver is the guy that's open. He did start to play hero ball later in his career, and I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen to Jordan Love this year, but that was a hero ball type play, and it was a really bad decision.
But that's what happens when you're going through that for the first time,
Correct.
right? You hope you learn from that. Pressure's on. You're feeling it a little bit in a playoff game, tight one. You think you're going to lead your team from a come-from-behind victory. You just hope that at that point he can learn from that and be able to apply it to close games this upcoming season.
We have never done a state of the kicker in our 3 years together. We will be doing that today.
Well, we got an extra hour now.
We do.
We do.
That's true. We do. Time is on our side. But
do we need a full segment? I can tell you right now. It's bad. State of the Kicker's bad.
And State of the Kicker is over. No, real quick, a couple things on Jordan Love, because I do want to get to the new look running back room coming up next. Jordan Love, MVP good, like top 5 MVP good this upcoming season. Can he be?
I think this year's a year too soon. I think he's going to be in that conversation. I think this year he will not be.
I would love for that to be the narrative and for him to play at that level. But again, that's the expectation game. Are we really going to put that on him? Because again, during that 8-game stretch that we talked about, he also had the Giants game, which was not very good, right? And had some opportunities in that game and didn't get it done, which is not a criticism of him. That happens to literally every quarterback, including Patrick Mahomes in the game against the Packers. So it does happen, but do I think that he is trending in that direction? Absolutely. Am I going to put that burden on him in addition to everything else? You can do that. I'm not going to do it.
I think I'm with you guys. I think it's probably a year too early. Again, I go back to the word consistency. I need to see consistency out of the quarterback, because when you think back to the Aaron Rodgers and the Brett Favre era, you knew what they were capable of. Gabe, you just alluded to it, right? You were comfortable going into every season with Aaron Rodgers, knowing he's going to get his and he's going to put your team, at least your offense, in a position to win every game. I don't think Jordan Love's quite there yet. I think that's the step he has to take this year before getting to the step of, hey, he might be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
I mean, the league is littered with guys who have had good half seasons or full seasons.
100%.
What separates the other guys is the ability to do it consistently year in and year out. So, again, that's not a criticism of Jordan. He's been a starter for 1 year. So now go out and do it again. It's about stacking successes, to go back to Mike McCarthy.
$58 million a year. Too high or too low?
Well, I think the number should start with a 7. I just want to get as much attention as Mike Tannenbaum has gotten.
I think ultimately it is going to be just below that. I think 56.
Okay. Jason?
That would still make him the highest paid quarterback.
Correct.
That's correct. Annually. Correct.
I don't care about that. I just think that that's such a scam that you can inflate the numbers to make it look that way. I want to know how much money he's going to get guaranteed. And if he gets a guarantee that has a 2 at the beginning and is 3 digits, then we're really talking about how much of a commitment it is.
So, again, Chewy was at a different point in his career when this happened. I don't know if you've heard him tell this story.
I have, but tell it again.
So he's, Chewy, the last contract that he signed made him the highest paid tight end, and he was having a couple of injury issues, and they were kind of dragging it along. Finally, it shown that he was staying healthy, being very productive, and, the talks just kind of weren't getting, I guess, probably dragging up more than he would want. And then one day, Andy Reid just came down to him and went, hey, what's it going to take? Chewy said, I just want to be the highest paid tight end, just to say I was the highest paid tight end. And Andy went, all right, it's done. So some guys that's really important to.
Right.
And maybe Jordan's too early in his career for that, but his agent wants to say, I represent the quarterback.
That right there is the biggest piece.
The agent wants to say, I represent the guy who's the highest paid quarterback, and that's why I think 56 annual average is what it's going to be.
I'm not an agent. I wouldn't be good at it, but my goal would be to get my guy the most guaranteed money possible. And the fact that Deshaun Watson, with all the baggage that he comes with, got $238 million guaranteed, that's the number I'm looking for. You want to make it $238 million and 10 cents, but guarantee the whole contract? Count me in. But I don't know. I understand that, but like you look at the Trevor Lawrence deal, the devil's in the details there. The guarantees aren't quite what they were advertised to be when the news first broke. And so, yes, he's the highest paid, but his guaranteed money is, I believe, less than Jared Goff's guaranteed money.
That's correct. And I would not be shocked if the Packers wanted to protect themselves with less guarantees. Right. Because this is a guy who a year ago, and Brian Gutekunst said, that's a lot of money to pay a guy who hasn't played. And he was talking about $20 million for a fifth-year option. We're talking about more than double that on an annual average salary for Jordan Love right now.